Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. I wanted to have this video out on Halloween, but that didn't end up happening, but I still hope you enjoy. In this video, we're going to be looking at the classic vampire horror flick, Fright Night from 1985. I did a poll asking which version you guys enjoyed more, the 1985 version or the 2011 remake of Fright Night, and the original definitely won. Although a lot of people in the comments did say they enjoyed the remake a lot, it just couldn't beat out the original. They did come out with a Fright Night Part 2 in 1988, still including Charlie and Peter Vincent, but Amy and Evil Ed do not make a return, unfortunately. It only released in a few theaters and you would be hard pressed to find a physical copy, but I've heard it's not bad if you enjoyed the first. You can actually find the full movie on YouTube. So they released Fright Night Part 2, and then did a remake called Fright Night, and then made another Fright Night 2, so I don't know, I found that kind of weird. I would take a look at the remake eventually if that's something you guys would be interested in, so leave a comment down below if you'd want to see that, and suggest any other movies or TV shows you might want me to cover. If you enjoy videos on vampires and werewolf movies, be sure to check out my other videos and maybe subscribe. The movie cover or poster for Fright Night is probably one of the best I've ever seen. First, I'm going to be giving a brief overview of the movie, then diving into the strengths, weaknesses, and abilities of the vampires of Fright Night. The movie begins with our main character Charlie and his girlfriend Amy watching a popular television show called Fright Night about the famous vampire hunter Peter Vincent. While looking out the window, Charlie sees some men next door carrying a coffin into the basement, which catches him off guard. He finds out from his mother that someone just bought the house next door, and in the background we hear on TV that someone's body was found in the train yard mutilated. The next day when Charlie gets home from school, a woman arrives in a cab and asks him if his house is 99 Oak, to which he replies that's next door. So she thanks him and starts walking towards the house. That night, Charlie hears a scream come from the house next door, and the lights go out. While at school the next day, he hears on the news that another mutilated body was found of a thought to be prostitute, and Charlie is thinking that it could be the girl from yesterday. When he returns home from school, while staring at the house next door, we see someone is inside, painting the basement windows black. Charlie tries to sneak over to the house and open the storm doors to the basement where he saw them put the coffin. But this is where he meets Billy for the first time. Before he can look into the basement, Billy jumps out and says, "Hey kid!" and then asks him what he's doing, to which Charlie replies, "Nothing." And Billy says, "Well, let's just make sure that it stays that way." Charlie falls asleep while watching the neighbor's house that night, looking for anything suspicious, but awakes to see the neighbor Jerry Dandridge with a woman. Jerry looks into the air and Charlie can see what looks to be fangs start to grow and is about to bite the girl's neck when he suddenly looks up, realizing he is being watched through the window. He makes it very clear that he sees Charlie and closes the window, and Charlie gets a good look at his strange hand. Charlie quickly runs outside to see if he can find out what happened to the girl and sees Billy carrying what looks to be a body of someone in a garbage bag and loads it into the back of their vehicle. Billy must be some kind of bodyguard or servant for the head vampire Jerry, and he watches over the house while Jerry's in his coffin. There is a strange gust of wind moving around, and then the vampire appears from the shadows. Charlie's mother opens the front door and yells for Charlie, but he stays still and quiet so Jerry doesn't see him. But Jerry seems to be able to sense him, or has an advanced sense of smell or something, because he looks around and then throws his eaten apple right in front of where Charlie is sitting in the bushes. He gets up and runs back to his house, and when Charlie's back at the house, he says that he's seen a bat fly over his head before seeing Jerry appear. Charlie tells his mother and girlfriend that he thinks the neighbor killed the two girls that were on the news, and also says he is a vampire, which of course they don't believe. So he says that he's going to go to the police. He starts out at first only saying that Jerry and Billy could be the murderers and that he's seen them carrying what looked to be a body, but as soon as he says vampire, it's over and he's left with no help, and in great danger because the vampire's seen Charlie, and now he's also tried to call the police on him, which they probably don't appreciate because they don't want extra attention. As a last resort, Charlie goes to his friend Ed's house, who he calls Evil Ed. He wants to ask him how to protect himself from a vampire because the vampire will know for sure now that he knows what he really is. Ed doesn't take him seriously, thinking he's joking.
What? Come on, Evil, I haven't got time to explain, just...
But once Charlie convinces him he's serious, Ed hands him a cross, but tells him he must have total faith in it for it to work. And gets some garlic, links to the stuff you can hang from your neck and around your window. Then, oh of course, there's holy water, but you gotta get a priest to say a blessing over it first. But lastly, Ed tells Charlie that the most important thing is that a vampire cannot enter someone's home unless being invited by the rightful owner. Charlie goes back home and we see him nailing his window shut so no one can get in, but then his mother tells him to come downstairs because there's someone she wants him to meet. and to his horror, it's his neighbor Jerry Dandridge, the vampire accompanied by the most 80s music you've ever heard. Jerry jokingly says, "What's the matter, Charlie? Thought I wouldn't come over without being invited first?" Then shares a small laugh with Charlie's mother. But when Jerry stops laughing, he tells Charlie, "You're right. You're quite right, of course. Now that I've been made welcome, I'll probably drop by quite a bit. In fact, anytime I feel like it." Although Charlie is visibly shaken, his mother says, "Oh Jerry, anytime. It's so nice someone interesting has moved into the neighborhood." Charlie's mother asks him if he's alright as he's walking backwards toward the stairs to get to his room and is acting like he's seen a ghost. Before Charlie leaves to go upstairs, Jerry adds that it was nice to meet you, Charlie.
See ya. Soon.
Jerry does in fact attempt to kill Charlie that night, but is forced to leave when Charlie's mother wakes up. I'm guessing he left because he doesn't want to have to kill her too, because that would bring more suspicion if he moves in and his neighbors both drop dead. But I guess killing just Charlie is fine because he's probably going to go around town telling everyone Jerry's a vampire, creating a lot of headaches. Especially if he calls the police again or other people are going to be showing up to his house unexpectedly. After narrowly escaping, Charlie tries to enlist the help of Peter Vincent, the vampire hunter from one of his favorite TV shows, to assist him with Jerry. But Charlie and his friends find out that Peter's a fraud and doesn't even believe in vampires, until he meets Jerry and gets unintentionally tangled up with Charlie and must now use his vampire knowledge to try and save them. Definitely one of my favorite characters in the movie. The casting of every character in this movie just feels perfect. The vampires of Fright Night do not age and cannot be killed by regular means. They are weak to stakes through the heart, sunlight, holy water, garlic, and crosses. Sunlight will burn their skin and set them on fire, and is seen slamming Jerry into a wall. A vampire will die if exposed for too long. Crosses cause vampires pain, and they seem to cower when shown a cross. Peter uses a cross to burn the forehead of a vampire, and that mark remains there for a long time, not healing like other wounds might, or at least taking longer to heal. When Peter uses a cross on two weaker vampires, it works perfectly fine. But when he tries to use it on Jerry, because he is an ancient vampire much older and stronger, the cross had no effect on him. Jerry informs Peter that in order for the cross to work on him, he must have complete faith in it. So the cross doesn't work on Jerry the same way it works on other vampires. Jerry is seen having super strength and speed, able to move extremely fast and even teleport. When chasing Charlie and his girlfriend, he was able to reappear several times, unmistakably teleportation. He was also able to easily dispatch of the two security guards in the club. He slashes one man with his razor-sharp nails and picks the other man up by his neck and throws him across the room. Vampires have extreme resilience. Although not a vampire, Billy was shot in the head from close range by Peter and then shot 5 more times and still seemed unharmed. It wasn't until he was staked through the heart that he was killed. His body begins to quickly liquefy, then become dust until there's nothing left but a skeleton that falls down the stairs and explodes into pieces of bone, which was an amazing practical effect that still looks pretty cool today. Charlie and Peter believed that Billy was a human because he could walk in the daylight, but I don't think a human could survive being shot in the head and then get up and still try and kill you. Nothing is known of Billy other than what is said on screen, which is nothing, but I think we can assume he is not a vampire. Possibly a half vampire, but a lot of people speculate that he is a zombie or a ghoul. Someone who has been partially changed through supernatural means to possess similar strength and resilience as a vampire. Although we don't know exactly what he is or how he became that way, he is supernatural nonetheless. And if Billy could survive all that punishment, I'm sure Jerry could do the same, and more. Vampires seem to be able to control their transformations and can transform to a varying degree. Jerry is seen being able to grow just his fangs or change his fangs and eyes, while other times he can fully transform into a terrifying creature with massive sharp teeth and his nails become elongated like claws. Vampires are also able to shapeshift. Jerry turns into a bat-like creature that also kind of resembles a gargoyle to fly around. Although he does seem to be able to fly while in his normal form, as he is briefly seen floating outside a window. Another vampire was able to transform into a wolf. Yes, you heard that right, a vampire turned into a wolf. And when he is staked while in his wolf form, he slowly and painfully turns back into a human, trying to pull the wood out of his heart. At times being in gratuitous half transformations until eventually he's completely human again and seemingly dead. Ed's reverse transformation is probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Not only does it look awesome with the practical effects, but it also holds some emotional weight, with Peter now unwillingly having to take the role of real-life vampire killer, watching Ed slowly die while he reaches out for help. When Jerry is killed by exposure to sunlight, He is set ablaze and becomes a skeleton resembling a giant bat-like creature until eventually he explodes and seems to disappear. Like Edgar Frog from The Lost Boys said, no two bloodsuckers go out the same way. When Jerry is killed, a girl that he bit is turned back into a human. Peter says, as long as you kill the head vampire before dawn, that someone can be turned back into a human. Jerry has super senses, as he knew Charlie was hiding in the bushes, even though there's no way he should have. I think it's likely he could maybe smell him, or just supernaturally sense that he was there. Alternatively, he could have seen Charlie in the bush when he flew overhead in bat form, as Charlie said he seen a bat fly over his head. Jerry is seen being able to teleport, something we don't see any other vampires perform. He was able to teleport multiple times while he was chasing Charlie and Amy. You can see them looking at him still, and a second later he appears at the top of this ramp. Jerry was also able to have some control over wind, causing a large gust as he was growling at Charlie in his room. He was able to float outside the window, like I said before, and some vampires in other series do this by manipulating the air. Although he was probably just flying by some magical means. When he dies, it also causes a large windstorm, causing the windows to shatter and objects to fly out. He also had the ability to control mist, as we see multiple times around his house, and when he chases Evil Ed. While chasing Ed, Jerry actually took the form of the mist, which is what Evil sees at the end of the alleyway, before appearing right behind him. He also has some mental-like abilities. He chases Charlie and Amy into a club, and when Jerry makes eye contact with Amy, he's able to make her come and dance with him, her almost looking hypnotized. Afterwards, she commented on not wanting to dance with him, but she couldn't help it. When Jerry first meets Amy, a similar thing happens, where she seems to become infatuated with him. And although I think she does like him on her own, he's definitely manipulating her. After Jerry had turned Amy into a vampire, she seemed to be in some kind of sleep, but when Jerry is on the roof, he speaks aloud for her to awake and kill them, and she does. Jerry was able to control or communicate with Amy telepathically, possibly because he was the one who turned her, and in most vampire movies, if you sire, aka turn a vampire, you have a blood connection to them, and sometimes a mental connection as well. How to become a vampire in Fright Night. First, you will have to be bitten by another vampire. It is also possible you could ingest the blood. As long as the vampire that turned you doesn't die before dawn, you should be okay. As we learned that if the head vampire is killed before your transformation is complete, you'll go back to being a human. Vampires must feed on blood to survive, but can ingest regular food, as we see Jerry eating on multiple occasions. Some vampires from other series and films can't eat solid foods and can only consume blood, solid food sometimes making them sick. When a vampire is turned, some seem to retain quite a bit of their personality, like Ed, where Amy seems to be more of a generic killing machine, not even recognizing Charlie. Although she is commanded by Jerry to kill Charlie and Peter, so that might have been why. When Ed is a vampire, he is able to take the form of a wolf with large teeth, and Jerry is able to take the form of a bat-like creature. Vampires might be able to transform into whatever they want, or they might each have a unique transformation. If Amy had transformed into some kind of different animal, that would have been a good clue that every vampire has their own animal transformation, but maybe any vampire could turn into a wolf or bat. It's hard to say. Jerry slept in a coffin that he kept in the basement, but we don't see any other vampire have to sleep in one. When he gets burned by sunlight, he tries to get back into his casket, but Peter shuts it. So the coffin could be a weakness specific to Jerry or older vampires, as he seems to try to get back to it when damaged, so they might need it to recover, not being able to just sleep anywhere like some other vampires. Well, that's it for my video on Fright Night. I've never seen this movie before making this video, and I really enjoyed it. Watching it the first time felt comfortable, like it was a classic to me right away, and all the characters are already memorable. I've had a lot of requests for this movie, and a lot of people seem to really like it, and now I understand why. It definitely holds up with the best from this era, like Lost Boys and Near Dark. Well, thanks again for watching. Don't forget to leave any movies or series you want me to cover below. I always read through them. Drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video.